Stop what you're doing right now and pay careful attention, because what I'm about to say will radically change the way you've interpreted your whole existence. You were not paranoid. You were not overreacting. You were not making up patterns that did not exist. You were correct every time they attempted to make you reject your own intuition by labeling you as theatrical, hypersensitive, or crazy. You felt something genuine. Now it's time to face the facts front on. The proof exists. The blueprint is there. Every premeditated step that undermined your confidence, relationships, and perspective of reality was not an accident. It was a meticulous procedure that gradually drained your strength. You were picked not by luck. This did not happen at random. It was not a coincidence. And that was definitely not terrible luck. It was a calculated strategy devised long before you learned their identities. Do you want to discover why you were targeted? Because you had something they could not reproduce. An uncommon frequency, a spiritual resource they desired but could not provide. Your energy filled the gap in their empty life. You were their life energy, an unending supply of inspiration, warmth, and brightness that they could never produce on their own. They did not merely happen upon you. They observed you. They've marked you. You were mine. Something to remove until you were left with just the shell of your previous self. They were not attempting to connect. They were attempting to devour while you were off enjoying your life. Assuming that others behaved with the same fundamental decency as you. They were watching. Every tale you shared became ammo. Every weakness you disclosed became a source of pressure. Every dream you shared became a map of your emotional structure. They were not paying attention to grasp what you were saying. They were deciphering you. Every detail you disclosed helped them create a psychological duplicate of you, which they could use to get past your barriers and into your inner world. Think about those early chats. The ones who seemed natural and magnetic nearly melted away as they matched your thoughts. You finished your statements and seemed to comprehend your soul without having to explain. You assumed it was a link, but it was really reconnaissance. They were gathering data on your anxieties, triggers, and wants. They created a profile so accurate that they could control you from inside, convincing you that you had finally discovered something true. You had not. You had been researched. Analyzed like a specimen under a microscope, you were ignorant that you were the subject of the experiment. And here is when the narrative takes a darker turn. They were not working alone. You weren't up against just one manipulator. It was a whole network. People you believed were bystanders were discreetly sharing information. Friends you confided in were double agents monitoring your mental condition. Strangers who came by chance at the right moment formed part of the web. Your life has become a regulated environment. Every motion was recorded, every phrase was analyzed, and every response was assessed. Remember those folks who arrived unexpectedly when you were at your lowest point? The ones who appeared perfectly timed to be sympathetic and helpful. They were not accidents. They were implanted. Their goal was to acquire information, influence your decisions, and keep control. And while you were attempting to recover, they were tightening the net. Every time you questioned yourself was a triumph for them. But every time you followed your instincts, there was a faint voice whispering that something was wrong. You were coming close to the truth. You were never insane. You were awakened. These interactions were not accidental. They were prearranged placements. Every individual who entered your life at that time had a purpose. They were purposefully placed to gather information, affect your judgments, and lead you to conclusions that had previously been planned long before you were aware of the game being played. Every new buddy was checked, authorized, and presented under false pretenses. Every event, meeting, and apparently innocent social occasion was designed to further their broader purpose. You weren't experiencing coincidences. You were living inside a controlled experiment. They did not desire authenticity. They needed information, emotional, psychological, and spiritual. They wanted to discover how far they could push you before breaking. So they devised situations to put your capabilities to the test. Conflicts that seemed spontaneous yet were rehearsed. Disagreements that seemed personal but were staged. Crises have developed. Just when you were regaining your equilibrium. These were not organic difficulties. They were emotional ambushes, meant to sap your vitality and leave you too tired to examine the reality. They analyzed your trauma reactions as scientists would a specimen, timed their manipulations for when you were most susceptible, weary, unsure, or isolated. You recall the subtle alterations in group talks. You were not included in the talks that ended the minute you entered the room. You couldn't understand the sudden tightness you felt, but it was due to coordination. They were exchanging notes, providing reports on your responses, and altering their strategies in real time. You were living in a controlled environment, ignorant that almost every encounter was jeopardized. Your life had become a stage, and everyone around you was performing a part in a screenplay you had no idea existed. The isolation did not occur all at once. It crept in so slowly that you didn't notice until the harm was done. People that actually cared for you gradually faded away. This was not natural drift. It was a planned separation, a systematic breakdown of your support system. They eliminated anybody who might have grounded you one by one, until you were left alone with no one to confirm your reality but those in charge of it. They did not harm your relationships directly. They corroded them from inside. They murmured half-truths, sowed doubts, and manipulated narratives with surgical accuracy. They altered perception, transforming allies into skeptics and friends into silent watchers. While you were defending yourself against allegations you didn't comprehend, the individuals who had previously shielded you became unintentional agents of your isolation. They were already reworking the tale to show you as the unstable, troublesome one. Everyone needs to remove themselves from the situation. They didn't assault you openly. They created a reputation around you. A stealthy, deadly story was murmured in secret talks. By the time you understood you were being depicted as unstable, the decision had already been made. Friends have stopped calling. The family became wary. Co-workers avoided eye contact. Throughout, they maintained complete deniability. They never said anything directly. They just sowed seeds and relied on others' imaginations to water them. That was the brilliance behind their isolation policy. They made it seem like you were the one doing it. They created circumstances where you had to choose between surrendering your integrity and maintaining people in your life. And when you picked your ideals, they saw it as disorder. They made your borders seem hostile. Your quiet came out as arrogance and your seclusion as self-sabotage. You weren't the one pushing them away. They created a scenario in which everyone thought you did. They created scenarios in which, regardless of what you did, every emotion, word, and silence was used against you. If you have protected yourself, you were aggressive. If you remained silent, you were guilty. If you walked away, you showed instability. They set traps so that whatever reaction you offered would be presented as proof that you were the issue all along. It was not arbitrary. It was strategic. They wanted you to absorb the guilt so much that your sorrow became evidence of your alleged pathology. However, their most sophisticated weapon was not the manipulation itself. What they did to your vision was their masterwork, the pinnacle of psychological warfare. They did not just fool you, they rebuilt your world from the bottom up. They twisted reality and illusion till you couldn't believe your own senses. Up turned down, right became wrong. Every actual event you had was reframed to fit their story. They rewrote history as it happened, removing facts, distorting context, and leading you to question everything you saw, heard, and experienced. You were not confused by chance. You were programmed to be. Remember when you challenged them over anything cruel they said or did? They gazed back blankly, saying that it never occurred. They branded you insane, neurotic, or mentally unstable just for bringing it up. That was not amnesia, it was psychological erasure. It was a premeditated attempt to upset your memory and make you question your own thoughts. Every time they disputed your reality, they pulled another thread from your internal compass, until you couldn't distinguish the difference between north and south. They'd injure you, then pretend surprised when you bled. They would provoke you while seeming to be calm and sensible. They had promised something and afterward claimed you misunderstood. They'd cause commotion, then accuse you of being too theatrical. Every contact becomes a moving maze. Walls move, floors tilt, and exits disappear. You could never get your footing, and that was the goal. They wanted you fatigued, second-guessing oneself and finally relying on others to determine what was true. Then you began recording receipts, screenshots, texts, and recordings. You were not being paranoid. You were striving to survive. You were gathering information not to win an argument, but to reassure yourself that your reality was still valid. Because regular relationships do not need evidence. Normal individuals do not cause you to doubt your own sanity. What they were doing was abnormal. It was planned psychological conditioning. By the time you saw the trend, they'd already rewrote your tale for everyone else. They had persuaded others that you were unstable, a liar, and a manipulator. So, when you eventually presented your proof, it just served to support their story. See how paranoid they are? This is how effective their system was. They made the truth seem absurd. You were once solitary, hesitant, and doubtful of your own recollections. That's when the actual extraction started. That's when they went in to drain what was left. Your confidence, tranquility, and brightness. You were not broken. You were disassembled piece by design. Now you have to figure out what they were really wanting. However, it wasn't simply about your time, energy, or finances. They emptied all of them. What they want was far more holy, something irreplaceable. They were for your essence, light, and frequency. That unique vibe that made you clearly yourself. Your inner fire terrified them because they could imitate your words, style, and even your mannerisms. However, they could never duplicate your spirit. So they had just two options: possess it or destroy it. They preyed on your emotions like predators posing as friends. Every time they aroused your fear, irritation, or despair, they became stronger. Your ailment was their power supply. Your uncertainty provided them with both shelter and sympathy. The part of you that continued to strive to understand and heal them served as their playground. They created crisis after crisis, just to watch you struggle to repair what they had damaged. Feeding off the energy you used to restore equilibrium. They used your empathy against you, transforming your greatest traits into a feeding mechanism. Every gift you offered to the table was either taken or undervalued. When you made something outstanding, they claimed it as their own idea. When you've accomplished something extraordinary, they termed it luck. They scrutinized you thoroughly. Your creativity, reasoning, and intuition then stole your essence, claiming your ideas as their own while telling you that you had nothing unique to give. They did not just want to steal what you had. They intended to rewrite reality so that you would think you never experienced it in the first place. Your tiredness was more than just emotional, it was also due to a lack of energy. They drained your vital power like an unseen leech. They kept you in a loop of turmoil and peace, purposefully disrupting your emotions so you remained emotional and vulnerable. Because when you are imbalanced, you are easily drained. They understood just when to antagonize you, when to fake concern, when to vanish, and when to re-emerge. Each motion is intended to keep your energy field split open. And each time you attempted to relax, every time you thought you were getting back on track, they contrived another catastrophe to bring you back down. However, it was not enough for them to feed on you in secret. You were too strong and dazzling. Your presence endangered the illusion they had created. They needed to publicly discredit you. That's when the slander campaign started, quietly and systematically, while you were still attempting to fix things, believing their falsehoods about wanting peace, and safeguarding their reputation out of devotion. They'd already destroyed yours. They played a lengthy game. 10 steps ahead, they've painted you as the aggressive, unstable, and villain in a screenplay they wrote months ago. They created a story in which they were the saint who did everything to assist you and you were the ungrateful, unpredictable one. They cherry-picked screenshots and text to remove context, manipulated discussions to make you seem insane, and repeated tales with just enough truth to make their falsehoods convincing. They triggered your responses, then used their responses as evidence of your instability. It was such a sophisticated psychological setup that by the time you knew what was going on, the public judgment had already been determined. Then came the flying monkeys, recruits who served to reinforce their story. These were not random individuals turning against you. They were deliberately picked operators. They targeted those who were readily influenced by talk, those who already envied you. They lived for drama. They spoon-fed them chosen information that confirmed their prejudices and turned their interest into complicity. The abrupt change in how others regarded you. The murmurs, the sideways glances, the distance. None of this was a coincidence. It was all planned. A social assassination carried out via proxy in order to utterly isolate you while keeping their hands clean. They did not only target your reputation. They tried to rewrite your identity. But they could never erase the truth, which had tormented them from the beginning. You held a light that they couldn't take, only orbit. They created an army of proxies to keep the abuse going long after they left you, making the assaults look natural. As if everyone around you had independently arrived at the same terrible conclusion. Every time you attempted to protect yourself, you fell straight into their trap. They'd previously programmed everyone to see your defense as aggressive. Your honesty is deceitful. You're using evidence as manipulation. The structure was airtight. Silence indicated guilt. Speaking up implied instability. Every conceivable action verified the deception they had sown. You were trapped in a psychological and social chokehold, an unwinnable game intended to push you to retreat. And that withdrawal was their winning condition. They could tell when you were starting to get up. They interfered whenever you regained clarity. Just as your soul began to settle, something or someone would emerge and bring you back beneath a message. Out of nowhere. An unexpected encounter. A common buddy has just checked in. Everything was planned. It was surveillance disguised as a coincidence. They observed your mental state as scientists would a test subject, recording your trends. Keep track of your recovery progress, watching for indications of healing. And every time you came near to peace, they attacked because mending was the one thing they couldn't tolerate. The moment you stopped seeing yourself as the issue, their whole story crumbled. Those strange messages that appeared when you were finally feeling relaxed. They get timely information from common connections. These unexpected reminders of their presence. They were everything but random. They were carefully timed triggers designed to reopen wounds that were closing. Subtle psychological hooks are intended to keep you inside their energy grasp, even at a distance. They wanted you to feel watched. They wanted you to remember they still had access, that you were never really free. They also know just how to weaponize your empathy. When you started detaching, they would send out distress signals that hinted at pain. Apologies for the earnest murmurs to common friends about how much they missed you. They knew you were conditioned to care. And they took use of that response every time they wrote sob tales portraying themselves as the broken one, knowing that it would pique your sympathy. Knowing you could reach out to correct something they never meant to repair. They wanted to keep you involved. Not out of love, but out of control. Those unexpected apologies, those I-changed communications that come months later. That was not transformation. It was a strategy. They'd researched recovery materials, mimic the language of responsibility, and discover how to effectively fake development in order to create doubt in your mind. They'd say all the appropriate things. Acknowledge their flaws, show remorse, and pledge reform without ever undertaking the interior work. The focus was on performance rather than improvement. Redemption as theater. And just as you thought they progressed, they reversed, trapping you in yet another cycle of hope and despair. This is the part that most people don't see coming, and it's what makes the whole system so dangerous. You continue to attempt to explain their activities through the prism of typical human motivation. You searched for empathy, regret, rationality, and even agony. However, you made a mistake there. They weren't operating on emotional wounds. They were executing based on strategic goals. You were not dealing with someone looking to connect. You were interacting with someone who was conducting an operation. You were targeted for reasons unrelated to personal chemistry or misunderstanding. You represented something they intended to neutralize, extract, or exploit. It didn't matter who you were as an individual. It was about what you represented, your brightness, potential, impact, and resonance. You were a variable in their broader plan. Dismantling you was never personal. It was tactical. Perhaps it was your influence. They intended to take away your capacity to easily inspire others and command attention without even attempting to elicit a genuine emotion. In a world focused on performance, perhaps it was your network. The relationships you fostered through sincerity, commitment, and respect are resources they could never acquire on their own. Perhaps it was your ideas, vision, or ability to create beauty out of turmoil. Perhaps it was something deeper. Your brightness, your soul. That unique inner frequency that made you indestructible in ways they could never fathom. Pure electricity lit their shadows, terrifying them. Because when someone constructed wholly of illusion comes near to the reality, the mask crumbles. So, rather of developing, they chose to smash the mirror that showed their emptiness. You held something that destabilized their whole construct. Your very presence challenged their carefully manicured image, control, and narrative. They couldn't replicate, purchase, or fake it. So they did what parasites do when exposed to light. They attached themselves and started feeding. They desired what you had but were unwilling to work for it. They did not want to grow into it. They intended to pluck it right from your soul. You were competition that had to be destroyed, a danger to their hierarchy, a resource to be grabbed, managed, and then discarded. Your energy was exhausted. What you thought was a relationship was really infiltration. The connection, whether sexual, platonic, professional, or family, was never built on mutual respect or affection. It was a transaction disguised as intimacy. Their adoration was not emotional. It was strategic. Their appeal was not accidental. It was scripted. Their empathy was not genuine. It was mimicking. Every phrase, action, and touch was a performance designed to elicit a certain response from you as you fell in love. They were gathering information as you opened up. They were evaluating your vulnerabilities while you trusted them. They were performing real-time simulations to test limits, measure your emotions, and determine the most effective techniques to manage you. Every vulnerable share becomes ammunition. Every emotional confession served as leverage. Each act of forgiveness becomes a data point. You believed you were creating a relationship. They were creating a profile. You believed you were healing together. They were surveying your emotional geography in preparation for future weaponization. And when the time came to extract every ounce of worth, your attention, love, energy, and ideas, they stuck to the strategy they had devised from the beginning. The trash was not an accident. It was the execution. The brutality that seemed so unexpected was not a change of heart. It was part of the timeline. Before they entered your life, they devised an escape plan. Each stage of the relationship was pre-planned. Idealization devalued the nation's discard. You were never a partner, friend, or lover for them. You were an acquisition, a means to an end, a task to be accomplished. When the extraction was completed, they did not just go. They exploded. They caused such serious emotional destruction that your mind became a war. They ensured that their presence was felt even when they were not there, via uncertainty, guilt, and humiliation. You weren't supposed to move on easy. They designed it that way. And the worst thing isn't what they took. This is what they installed. They left behind invisible wounds that no one else could perceive. Psychological wounds that changed the way you see the world. They did not just shatter your heart. They rewrote the programming for your nervous system. They caused you to link love with dread, tranquility with danger, and attention with manipulation. They taught your body to recoil at kindness and prepare for treachery. You began confusing tranquility for boredom, stability for suspicion, and mental safety throughout a setup. They didn't just influence your thoughts. They reconditioned your whole being. Now you find yourself apologizing for your existence, explaining your requirements as if you were burdening someone, and protecting your limits as if you were launching a war. You overthink basic encounters, repeat discussions in your thoughts, and wonder whether your emotional reactions are genuine or excessive. That does not make you weak. That is programming. Their echo continues to play on repeat in your thoughts. You become hyper-aware, careful, and self-editing in ways you were never fearful of being misinterpreted, afraid of being excessive, sensitive, or passionate. They purposely instilled dread in you so that you would continue to police yourself long after they were gone. They appointed you your own warden. The internal critic that used to sound like them now talks in your own voice. You follow their rules, anticipate their replies, and punish yourself before others can. They do not have to haunt you directly. They reside rent-free in your reactions every time you suppress your truth to avoid disagreement. They win whenever you shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Their indoctrination succeeds. You're not just bearing trauma. You are carrying out their programming. A mind infection meant to maintain their hold over you. But here is the reality. They never wanted you to know you could modify the code. The same sensitivity they used as a superpower, the same empathy they twisted into your strength, and the same heart they attempted to corrupt. Is this evidence that you were never like them? They needed to manipulate to feel strong. You simply need to be real. And once you see the pattern for what it is, a system of control, you cease being the program and begin to be the programmer. You stop responding and recall who you were before they attempted to alter your soul. That is where their power stops. When you decide to quit carrying their ghost and begin reclaiming your own light, you acquired hypervigilance and continual stiffness in your shoulders. Your eyes unconsciously examine each room. The incapacity to completely relax, especially during tranquil periods. It did not come out of nowhere. That's not paranoid. That is what occurs when your body spends years in psychological battle. This is not a problem in your system. The system is adjusting to withstand the unthinkable. Your body realized that danger was not loud and clear. It was understated, emotional, and unexpected, all masked as love, worry, or care. So it rewired itself to detect even the tiniest variation in tone. The tiniest shift in facial expression is the most subtle evidence of stress in the air. You learned to read atmospheres because your life relied on it. You learned that safety may quickly lead to pandemonium, and that individuals can weaponize compassion. That comfort may be trap, and that apologies did not necessarily imply peace. As a result, your nervous system remained constantly on alert, always observing, calculating, and ready for the next onslaught. This wasn't an overreaction. It was a strategy. That was your body. Learning that letting down your defenses meant risking tragedy. It was the mind's equivalent of sleeping with one eye open. These tendencies, which therapists may refer to as hypervigilance, anxiousness, or overanalysis, are not indicative of fragility. They are evidence of your perseverance. They are the reason you're still standing. But what kept you alive on the battlefield has now imprisoned you in the wreckage. You cannot turn off the alarm, even if the conflict is ended. This is the tragic irony of trauma. Survival behaviors become prisons. Your body still believes the risk is there. It is still battling ghosts. Recovery is more than simply repairing wounds. It is about deprogramming. It's about determining which emotions were motivated by survival and which deserve to remain. It's about identifying the voice in your brain that tells you you're too needy, emotional, and passionate. That voice is not yours. It is them. It's an internalized reflection of their control. Long after they've left your life, the same screenplay continues to play out. That voice was taught to keep you little, to make you self-police, and to make you perform their task even when they are not around. And that is the genius and brutality of psychological warfare. It instructs the victim to self-destruct on autopilot. When you realize how deep that programming goes, the whole landscape of your history shifts. You start to recognize the mechanics, the manipulative loops that felt so intimate, personalized, and exclusive to your tale. However, they were really part of a blueprint. The patterns replicate across diverse individuals, relationships, and civilizations. It's almost mechanical, the same phases, words, and emotional dance. You begin to see that what seemed like fate was really planned. The love bombing, the powerful, euphoric connection that made you feel seen and understood at your soul level, was not love. It was a recruiting process. It was a conditioning phase aimed to hook you swiftly and profoundly before your intuition could raise a warning. The depreciation that followed. Your self-esteem gradually deteriorates. The subtle criticism veiled in care, as well as the changing goalposts of what qualified you as good enough. It was not about you changing. It was about maintaining control and tightening the discard. An unexpected desertion. The unexpected emotional coldness. The rewriting of history was not an act of random malice. It was the logical end to a cycle they'd mastered. You were never an exception. You were the following topic. Realizing this doesn't alleviate your anguish. It makes sense. It shows the truth. It was never about you being imperfect or broken. You were merely put in a part that they had rehearsed 100 times. You were the newest mirror. The next battery, the most recent source of energy. The playbook never changes. Only the actors do. And once you've seen the script, you can't unsee it. You begin to see the same manipulative strategies in others. Fast connection, mirroring of your values, and subtle testing of your limits masked as humor. You start to see how they interview their next victim in the same manner they interviewed you. You understand how they detected your scars, studied your triggers, mapped your fears, and then molded themselves into the image of your ideal person. They did not love you. They observed you. They became everything you'd ever dreamed. only to use that version of themselves to destroy you from inside. They position themselves as the healer of your past wounds, and suddenly they became the deepest hurt you've ever felt. That's the magic of their cruelty, individualized annihilation. But here's where everything changes. The instant you become aware of the system, you become what they dread the most. Unpredictable, immune-conscious knowledge deprives them of control. You begin to see the mask before it develops, to feel the manipulation, to sense the energy change, and even before the words appear. You become your own defense system. You cease being prey and begin to recognize patterns in human forms. You advance from survivor to sentinel, from wounded to watchtower. You can now see what most others cannot. Covert methods, emotional hooks, and behavioral mimicking. You start to help others see it too. You become a live warning system. Someone who can identify the risk while it still seems to be safe. And that's why they despise survivors. That is why they undermine, ridicule, and suppress those who speak the truth. Because when survivors speak, illusions crumble. When you draw back the curtain, the whole performance fails. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the deepening of my faith. Help me trust you, even when tangible proof is scarce. Let me believe in your eternal presence, knowing that you will never hurt me. I realize that your thoughts for me are those of prosperode, and they are not harmful to my future. Thank you, kind and everlasting Father, for always hearing my voice. I give this prayer to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provisions. I am thankful for your presence in my life and the richness you provide. If this video spoke to you, please subscribe to the channel and share it with others who need to hear this message. Leave a comment below about your trip and how you're getting ready for your own victorious homecoming. If you'd like to contribute to our work, please do so via Buy Me a Coffee. This allows us to consistently improve our content in order to provide you with the best possible experience. The link to Buy Me a Coffee is in the description. No present is too tiny. Whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share, your generosity spreads God's message and gives people hope. Do not stop here. Watch our next video for amazing insights into the indicators that indicate you are the chosen one. We've loved sharing this spiritual journey with you. Thank you for sticking with us until the finish. Keep shining brightly and face your fate with confidence. See you next time. Enlightened knowledge bestows blessings to all lovely individuals.